Okay. Hey, something changed. It says stream starts soon. Yeah, I can hear my voice. Yo, everybody.
So let's say you found a skeleton. How would you tell if it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
His mics aren't working right now, but he's all excited to be here. Very, very thrilled. So am I. Got a dinosaur behind me. Over that way. Nope, that's a guitar. Over that way. And Dapper, are you there?
Should be here. Oh, there we go. I fixed it. Sorry, everyone. In preparation for some upcoming RPG stuff that's going to go on the off-topic channel, I've been messing around with audio input and outputs on OBS, and apparently I haven't really fixed it. So, yeah, sorry about that. But hey, at least I caught it right off the bat. So, well, normally we would go into just some quick announcement stuffs, and then the drinking rules, and then Hovind, but we have a little bit of a treat before we get into that stuff. So, some of you might remember my recent video about Raw Matt, in which I called him out for self-publishing online a paper called, what was it? Antediluvian Patriarch de novo mutation rates. And the initial version that he was putting out there had the logo of a scientific journal at the top of the first page, which is a claim to have been published in said journal, which was in fact not true, constituting academic fraud. Ramat has since claimed that he did it so that it would look nice when he submitted it, which of course not in the publication requirements for the formatting, because you can actually just look up the formatting requirements or ask for them to be sent to you for any journal. I'll just send it to you. So and hello everybody. We got a lot of people here. We got Maya here. We got Kenny, Luca, Monk Mayfair, Zero Navarus. We got Andrew Cumming, Icarus, T Lane, Dunning-Kruger. Oh, Dunning-Kruger, you're gonna come up a lot, I think. But before that video even actually came out, it had already received a response video, which is kind of amazing. So we're gonna listen to it, and yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Dapper dumber. What do you call him? Dapper the stupid. Dapper the dumbest of the dumb. What does he do? Dapper goes out there. He goes out there because Matt's paper disappeared off the net. Then
I will point out, it was not because Matt's paper disappeared off the net. In fact, it didn't disappear off the net until I was already done with my second draft of the script for that episode.
What does he go? He goes out there calling Matt a fraud.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Dapper dumber, we've got a few replies to you coming up very shortly, and you're not gonna like it very much.
I will probably love it.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, I will probably love it.
That's all I can say. I'm not gonna say too much, but you're a dickhead. You're a sucking little loving dickhead. Dick poof the mother. You Dapper, you dog. You're a dog. You're a dog, Dapper. You know what you are? You're a dirty, mangy, smelly little dog.
I feel like he doesn't know that I'm a dinosaur.
I like dogs.
Yeah, cool. Dogs are great. Isn't there a dog nearby?
There's a dog very close by.
Oh, there she is. Aww.
Hey, dog.
Look at
The
that.
famous.
That doesn't know how to refute anything scientific. All you can do is do freaking personal attacks on people because you're a dog.
When have you ever done a
Dog.
personal attack on someone?
Dog. Do you understand what
I guess you could call my Kent Hovind is a coward video a personal attack, but it was pretty well demonstrated that he was in fact acting cowardly.
I don't think any personal attacks.
No, not really. That's not really my thing.
dog is? Well, let me give you an idea. Go to the Bible and have a look at when a guy had a go at, King David, and his servant said, King David, do you want me to go over there and remove that dog's head for what he said to you? Well, I'm not saying we should remove your head, but, you know.
Anytime you start saying, I'm not saying that we should do something fatal to you, and then you follow it with a but, perhaps reconsider that whole statement. Just free advice.
There's no
There's
reason to say
precedence
something
for
like
it in the Bible. You're a dog, Dapper. You're a dog. You're a low-life little fancy little pants little dog. You and your Navy career. You were in the Navy, were you?
I was in the Navy.
You know what they say about in the Navy? They say this. In the Navy, we cop it up the rear. In the Navy, you need to be a queer. Well,
I just want to point out, Jason here has come up with his own even gayer version of a Village People song. And you know what? Good for you. I'm not sure what that says about your proclivities, Jason. I think there might be some projection if you're coming up with a gayer version of the Village People.
Trying to be a little homophobic.
Just a little bit. I think there might be. I think there might be some denial of his own interests.
Possible.
Well, were you a queer when you were in the Navy, Dapper? Just wondering.
I will say this, because I also, in addition to my religious and political views, don't get into my sexual habits. I was neither more nor less of a queer when I was in the Navy than I am now.
Could you please answer that question? Are you a queer, Dapper? Or have you got a missus? Oh, I'm not sure.
I feel like that's a false dichotomy. I feel like you can be straight and also not married.
No, that's impossible.
That's impossible.
Everyone who gets married before they got married, they were gay.
Oh, okay.
Everyone.
Okay.
I don't really care if you're a queer or not. Doesn't really matter. But I was just wondering.
Well, we know what matters deeply to you. You just went on a 2-minute rant about how gay you think I am. It clearly matters. Right, well, yes. I'm a gay dog.
Wondering, because you never seem to talk about a missus. Well, not that I've seen, not that I watch your stupid channel very much, because the incoherent babble that goes on there is absolutely fucking mind-blowing.
Hey, that's only when I talk.
Stupid beyond.
Hey, I also don't plan on getting into my relationship status, whether it be single, married, girlfriend, any of those things. Because you know what? None of that matters.
Believe it's enough to make someone completely stupid. If you're only partly stupid, if you listen to Dapper, you'll be Dapper the dumbass. You'll be completely stupid. Dapper is the biggest fucking wanker that ever walked the planet. And
yes, Chesh, but I'm pretty sure that he's okay with it when it applies to women.
Dapper, I'm really looking forward to your video in, what was it this morning, 30 hours, 20 hours or 15 hours or something from now.
And that's where he admits that this came out before my video did. So he has no idea what I was saying in it.
I'm looking forward to it. We're looking forward to seeing it. Because Dapper, you know what? We haven't focused on you yet. But if you want to look like a moron, that's fine. You go into that video, Dapper. You go in there and you make fucking Matt look like a dickhead. You say all the fucking slanderous shit you like about him.
I missed a few beeps. Oh well. But
what was the slanderous thing you said about him?
Well, the thing about slander is it has to be false for it to be slander. I backed up everything I said.
So none slander?
None slander. None.
Slander.
None. And I didn't make Raw Matt look like a dickhead. Raw Matt does a great enough job of that on his own by doing things like appearing on modern day debate, topless in an Egyptian headdress, or falsely claiming to have been published in a peer-reviewed journal.
Because the simple fact is, you don't know why.
I missed a fair few things because I spent like 2 hours trying to go through and catch every single thing I should beep, and there were a lot.
That paper was rejected. You don't have a clue, do you?
But I guess that does mean I think our one free F-bomb is used up.
I tell you what, mate. There's evidence.
Ooh, evidence.
Those at that peer review never even looked at the paper, never even read it. They probably read the first few lines and saw stuff about creation and went, we don't want that sort of paper here. We're not like
I bet
not
that's what
even bothered to look at.
So here's the thing. I'm pretty sure they didn't bother to read it because it didn't meet the submission guidelines. Effectively, this is like going to a publisher with your handwritten in crayon manuscript on big lined paper that you get in like first grade to practice your letters on, and it's all written in just a random mix of block capitals and lowercase, and then you threw in some cursive because you just started learning that in school. You have a hand-drawn little graph that looks like a dog, kind of, and you're like, would you like to publish this? And they just look at it and like, no, because you cannot meet the very basic minimum requirements to even be considered for publication. If you can't format correctly, no one will publish you. So yeah, I fully believe that the proceedings of the Public Library of Science, Biology, in no way is planning on publishing that video as is. If they even bother to get back to Raw Matt, I'm sure it will be to say, fix your formatting, resubmit.
Not even bother to look at the science behind it or the mathematics. Not a freaking skerrick of a worry about the science or the mathematics behind it. Just, we don't want to look at that. Well, Dapper, you know what? Quit, dog, piece of
Oops.
Not long, Dapper, you're going to look like the biggest quit that ever lived. So you go ahead with your little I'm just warning you, Dapper. I'm just giving you a warning, mate.
He's warning me.
You go ahead with your little show.
The guy who was talking about beheading me is giving me a warning. Just,
Okay.
yep.
Just checking.
Just checking, yep.
Your little anti-fancy little fairy show. You go right ahead and do that. Dapper, one day, you might sit back and you might think to yourself, well, maybe I shouldn't do this because there's things that I don't understand. But that's the thing about evolutionists. They don't care whether they understand anything or not. They just make up shit off the top of their head.
Oh,
like
I missed so much.
Like Dan Cardinal, lying cockroach. What does he do? He comes on there and he says, this paper is 100% fact. It's got no assumptions in it at all. There's no phylogeny. There's no this. It's all 100% mutation rates.
I just want to point out, Dan is in the chat. So, Dan, you just got called out.
Verifiable, observable mutation rates.
And that is, in fact, Jason's phone going off, which he then went to answer, didn't bother to end the stream for 5 whole minutes. And that's what just happened.
Wow.
Yeah, he explained himself in the comments. So, I'm not linking directly to this video on this stream. If you want to find it while it's still up, because I have a suspicion it might be taken down for violating the community guidelines that say specifically you're not allowed to go on a rant insulting people for their intrinsic characteristics, including their sexuality. Or allowed to specifically threaten violence. So, yeah, I have a feeling that video won't stay up forever. But, you know what? It's been preserved in at least a somewhat modified form here.
Yeah.
So, let's get to the actual main event, which, of course, is the Kent Hovind video of the night, which is Creation Seminar 7D. There's still an E after this, Bent.
Yes.
Okay. We did get a download for posterity. I think it's still up right now. You could still download it if you wanted to. Just in case you really, really need to watch that unfiltered, raw Jason, faithful, honest, true.
I need to watch the last 4 minutes of the video.
The silent minutes.
Just that.
Yeah, I know. Robert Edsett said it's going to be hard for you to come back from that. Oh my goodness. Someone said I was gay on the internet. Man, 8th grade me would be devastated. Goodness. All right, so let's actually go over the rules here. So, this is the Kent with Bent drinking game that we like to play, and we do not condone other people playing it, but you may if you like. So, we drink whenever Kent Hovind says something that he gets right on his own, without it just being a direct quotation from someone else. As our least... Oh! We also drink for Godzilla, which, there you go. And also for Mothra, and there's a few other things. For instance, if you are a channel member and you super chat with either the Mothra or the Godzilla emoji, you take a drink. There are a few people who can super chat, and that alone is enough, like Mothra J Disco, because, you know, Mothra. We also drink whenever Kent says something that's just too stupid, and we kind of have to. Icarus sums up the video. Bleep, bleep, dog, bleep, bleep. Yeah, basically. Oh, Chesh has beer this time. Good. I'm drinking ginger ale with some whiskey in it. Bent's kombucha?
Kombucha, passionberry bliss. Again, the passionberry is one of my favorite berries.
Oh, Bent Hovind, no relation, for $2 said, like this with the Godzilla emoji? Yes. Take a drink.
What happened there?
All right. So, that is basically it for the rules. Did I say the one about the jokes? Yeah, whenever Kent Hovind tells a joke that just doesn't land at all.
A joke that, like, barely someone notices it was a joke.
Yeah, we take a drink
Who
for
knows
that.
how many we missed?
Well, it would be impossible to say. Because you could make the argument that literally everything he says in these seminars is a joke.
That's what I thought of the first video we saw. I thought it was like a crappy like SNL skit or something that some guy was trying to mimic.
All right, here we go.
Another contradiction people often ask about is, isn't the word Easter in the King James Bible an error? Didn't they make a mistake here? Every other version of the Bible, and I've got a whole collection of them here on the table, they use the word Passover in Acts chapter 12, verse 4. You look up Acts 12:4, and they say, after Passover. King James says after Easter. Well, let's read the passage and see what the truth is, okay? Now, about that time, Herod...
I'm just going to point out, if you're using that as a reason to diss the King James, it's kind of boring and lame. I don't know what Kent is going to go for, but here's the real answer. In the holiday that people who speak English call Easter is called Passover in every other language that I'm aware of. So, basically, in 1611, they just used the word in English that everyone else is using for Passover. The whole debate about the name of this holiday in English is a fairly recent thing. And Godzilla.
The king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church, and he killed James, the brother of John, with a sword. And because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread. And when he apprehended him, he put him in prison, delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. Is Easter a mistake? All the other versions say Passover right there. Well, let's go back and study the original Passover. In Exodus chapter 12...
Yep, Luca Medugno points out it's Pasqua in Italian, and that is in fact the result of a Latinization of Pascha in Greek, which is itself a translation of Passover from Hebrew. Almost every language ultimately derives its word for Easter from the Greek translation of Passover. English is weird. I mean, English is weird about a lot of things, but that's just one of them.
The Lord said to Moses, Aaron, he said, this month, talking about April, shall be the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak unto all the congregation of Israel, in the 10th day of this month, take a lamb. April 10th, you pick out a lamb, keep it up for 4 days. On the 4th day, April 14th, you kill it and you eat it that night. That was the Passover when they were getting ready to go out of Egypt. Okay. And then you put the blood on the 2 side posts and on the top of your door. It says, they shall eat the flesh that night, April 14th. Kill the lamb, put the blood on the door, eat the lamb that night. Verse 11. It's the Lord's Passover. Eat it in haste, have your shoes on, hold your staff in your hand. Jews today still go through this, every year they go through the Passover celebration. Amazing to watch. We did this as a kid. My mom had us do this several times. We loved it, okay? Verse 14. This day shall be unto you a memorial. You shall keep it a feast.
Oh, and yes, German is also weird. Germanic languages can be a little bit weird in the same way altogether.
Feast. Verse 15. 7 days shall you eat unleavened bread. Here's the sequence. 10th day, pick out a lamb, watch it for 4 days, make sure no blemishes. 14th day, kill it. That night is the Passover. The death angel passed over the children of Israel.
You know what? I'll take a drink for Kent, without having it all be a quote, is giving a reasonably accurate description of the biblical passages surrounding Passover. Good job, Kent.
If they had the blood on the doorpost. Eat it that night. For the next 7 days, you're going to be traveling around, running from Pharaoh, and so you eat unleavened bread. They had their kneading troughs, put the bread in there, but no leaven, wrapped it up, put it on their shoulder, carried it around through the wilderness, and ate unleavened bread for 7 days. That was the 7 days of unleavened bread. And they still today do that to commemorate the great Passover. It reminds them, so for 7 days they eat unleavened bread. Verse 17. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. 18. In the first month, in the 14th day of the month at even, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at even. Starting the 14th, for the next 7 days till the 21st, eat unleavened bread. Numbers chapter 28. The 14th day of the first month is the Passover. And the 15th day of the month is the feast. 7 days shall unleavened bread be eaten. So here's the sequence of events. The Passover was always at night on April the 14th. For the next 7 days, they ate unleavened bread that always followed the Passover. Now, there was a pagan festival of Ishtar, or Ashtar, or today called Ishtar.
Okay, I'm taking a drink. There is no reason to think that Easter is named after Ishtar. For one thing, Ishtar wasn't an actively worshipped deity until long after any of the Germanic-speaking tribes encountered Christianity. And since it's only Germanic languages that do this weird thing, maybe it actually has to do with a similarly named Germanic goddess that we also know about, who had fertility rituals around the spring equinox. See, what actually happened is that some of the practices of older pagan religions in Germanic areas got brought into the Easter celebrations that didn't really coincide with the spring equinox, but were close enough. Yeah, that's what actually happened. And also, I'm pretty sure that there's not a huge connection between the Easter Bunny and Playboy. But what do I know?
Easter. That was a pagan festival that always came near the end of April. And it was so many days after the first full moon, and they had all kinds of formulas to figure out when this day comes. And we still use the same formulas today to calculate when Easter is.
Yeah, but Kent, those are the formulas that are also used to make sure that Easter falls on a Sunday, and that it's the closest Sunday, either the closest Sunday to Passover, if you're doing the Western, so the Catholic and Protestant thing, or the closest Sunday that there is to Passover, but not before Passover, if you're using the Eastern and Oriental Orthodox dates for Easter. Like, it's still tied to the Passover. The Passover is a big part of the date of Easter. The whole full moon calculation thing is to make sure it stays in sync with the lunar calendar, as well as always falling on a Sunday. Like, this is not a difficult question to figure out. You could have just looked it up. And I'm going to take a drink.
Why would Kent look
But
something
Easter
up
was
if
a
he already
pagan
knows
holiday.
the answer?
Yeah, I don't know. And the thing is, the pagan holiday he's talking about wasn't calculated that way. It was calculated based on the sun, because the equinox is not a lunar phenomenon, it's a solar phenomenon. The sun meets the ecliptic plane, and the entire Earth has equal day-night for that day. And there you go. That's the equinox. That's why it's called the equinox, when the day equals the night nox, Latin.
That's magic.
So here's the thing that really bugs me. I'm going to take a drink for it. I actually agree with Kent Hovind that complaining about the use of the word Easter in the King James Version of the Bible is stupid. Like, whatever. It's a stupid complaint. but he can't even get why that's the case correctly. He has to screw up his pointing out that this is not a valid criticism of the King James Version of the Bible.
Seems like he's doing it in the most convoluted way ever.
He is. It's just painful. Okay, here we go.
Holiday to commemorate the earth regenerating itself. You know, things start to grow again. You got Easter lilies, and so that's why they have all kinds of regeneration symbolism in the Easter holiday. Easter bunny, like Playboy bunny, okay? All stuff on fertility symbols. Easter rabbits, the Easter eggs. Those are all symbols of fertility.
Interestingly enough, Easter eggs predate in Christian celebrations of Passover and the resurrection of Jesus the adoption of various Germanic pagan practices to celebrate that holiday in Western Europe. There's a reason that you can find Easter eggs all the way in Russia and Greece, which did not, in fact, incorporate these there. Now, there is some debate as to when they were incorporated into Christian celebrations at the time. There are traditional explanations about the Christian symbolism behind the Easter egg. I don't really know or care. I'm just going to say that it's stupid to think that this is due to the incorporation that also involved the word Easter, because it predates that by like millennia.
And it is definitely a pagan holiday. Now, is it something worth fighting and beating somebody up over? No, okay? Christ did rise from the dead, and if you want to celebrate that day, that's fine. People get carried away over these holidays and go around, refuse to celebrate any holidays. I don't think you ought to do that.
You know what? I'm going to actually take a drink, because I think Kent is right that complaining about the alleged pagan origins of some holiday, whatever. Look, I'm an American. We celebrate as many holidays as we can get. Like, oh, hey.
Today's Kent's birthday.
Look, Americans celebrate Cinco de Mayo, which usually doesn't even get celebrated in Mexico. It commemorates a battle that the Mexican army lost, and it's basically only a locally relevant holiday in the area around where the battle was fought. But Americans use it as an excuse to drink a lot of tequila and wear sombreros, so whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, celebrate whatever holidays you want, as long as you're not hurting anyone thereby. And if you don't want to celebrate a holiday, then don't.
But you need to understand, Christmas and Easter both are pagan holidays, no question. That date, anyway, is. But
no, neither date is, Kent. Neither date actually lines up with these seasonally appropriate pagan holidays. Which is another point. The date of Easter also predates any incorporation of Yule time traditions into the celebration of Christmas. Christmas was originally a fairly minor Christian feast whose date was actually calculated based on the date of the Feast of the Annunciation, which was the major feast early on in church history. It was simply set as 9 months after the Feast of the Annunciation, because the assumption was that there was going to be an exactly 9-month gestation period for Jesus being carried by Mary. And it fell a bit after the winter solstice. And so it did, in fact, as it spread into Western Europe and Northern Europe, accumulate some of the Yuletime holiday traditions, which, by the way, still don't coincide in date. But yeah, again, this is not a hard thing to look up. It's pretty easy to figure out where does the December 25th date come from. And it's not from Yule. But Christmas celebrations then did accumulate some Yule traditions that people didn't want to abandon when they switched over from celebrating Yule to celebrating the different holiday, Christmas. So, again, Kent is being stupid because he has no sense of nuance when it comes to history. Not even Christian history, which he should have a better handle on.
I don't think it's nothing worth beating somebody up over. So, the feast days are never called Passover anywhere in Scripture. Peter was arrested during the days of unleavened bread. It says so very clearly in Acts 12, which means the Passover was already gone. Has to be. Herod wanted to kill him during his own pagan festival of Easter coming up in a few days. King James is the only version to get it right. Look at Acts 12 now.
Okay, you tell me where in the King James version, where in the Greek they translated some feast about Ishtar, Kent. It's not in there. It's just not. How connected is Mithra to December 25th? I would have to double check on Mithraism and December 25th. One of the problems with Mithraism is that it's not always easy to get a handle on what's going on there because it was a secret cult. So while it wasn't like some kind of super hush-hush secret society, people were openly members of the cult of Mithra. Most of their teachings weren't revealed until one was already a member, and then you were usually forbidden to go around telling everyone about them, and as a result, they also tended not to be written down. And as the cult declined in popularity, basically as the legion started to become less and less made up of actual Roman citizens and more made up of barbarians from places like Germania, it started to decline in favor of those religions from those areas, and then eventually it started to decline in favor of Christianity. There wasn't a whole lot of preservation of Mithraic texts, so it's tricky. I'm not super familiar with the literature on Mithraism. I could check in on it. But from what I have heard, the similarities in dating between holidays and the Mithraic cults and Christianity are overstated, but that might not be the case. However, we do have a lot of Christian sources that are very clear on the emphasis of the Feast of the Annunciation being the basis for the date of the much less important Feast of Christmas. So I would have to see a substantial amount of historical sources on Mithraism giving December 25th as an important date, or the what was it, April? Yeah, I think whatever, as an important day in Mithraism, so it could be the basis for the Christian Feast of the Annunciation.
Verse 3, Then were the days of unleavened bread. And when he apprehended him, he put him in prison, delivering before quaternions of soldiers to keep him intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. King James is the only one that got it right. And we'll cover more on that in a minute. The guy who invented the word Passover is William Tyndale. He made up that word, and he didn't use that word in Acts 12 when in his translation. Let me cover more.
It's literally just a calque of the Hebrew term, Kent. Like, that's all that is. What is the thing called in Hebrew? It translates as Passover, so it's just a calque. I'm gonna just take a drink. Because saying, oh, he just invented it, like he invented it out of whole cloth, when it's just literally a calque.
That in our college class. How did King Saul die? This heretics will say, well, look, it's got a contradiction here in the Bible. In 1 Samuel chapter 31, it says, Saul took a sword and fell on it and killed himself. He committed suicide. He asked the armor bearer, hey, will you kill me? I'm wounded. The guy said, no, I'm scared. And so Saul killed himself. When you read chapter 2, this guy walks up to King David at the camp and says, hey, here's Saul's crown and his jewelry. You know, I killed him. Because he knew David and Saul were enemies. And the Amalekite said, I stood upon him and slew him because I was sure that he could not live after that he was fallen. Well, did he die by suicide or did he die by the Amalekite? There's no contradiction here. He died by suicide, and this guy's lying. He's hoping...
I actually think that that's probably what the actual original intent of the book was. That actually seems pretty reasonable to me. So I'm gonna go ahead and drink because I think that's fair. Yeah, I don't think that has to be some kind of contradiction in the Bible. Though that seems like a pretty straightforward interpretation of that text to me. What do you think?
Sounds good to me, but that look on Kent's face right now, so smudge.
It is very smudge and arrogant.
To get a reward. Hey, David, I killed Saul. Ha ha, give me my reward, please. David's reward was, I'm going to cut off your head, son, okay? So there's all kinds of supposed contradictions in the Bible, and we cover a lot of these in our college classes, or if you can call into our radio program. We'll just cover a couple more because we could spend forever on supposed contradictions. There's a book called The Errors in the King James Bible by Peter Ruckman. It used to be called Problem Texts. It's basically the same book with a different cover on it. But in here, he covers 500 of the supposed contradictions in the Bible. We've got about 90 pages of data on supposed contradictions in our website.
Bradley D. Waters says, honestly, eating bread for like a week is basically just a bad diet. I will point out that the Paschal diet in traditional Judaism is not just bread for that time. It's just that the bread has to be unleavened, so it has to be flat bread. But it also usually involves a lot of various herbs and vegetables and lamb, and you know, there's a lot more than just the bread. Oh yeah, it is the cut off your head thing at Dapper Dino. Thanks, Jesh. Man, we're getting a lot of decapitation going on today. Or at least threats thereof. I know.
I have never been more scared.
On our downloadable section on articles about contradictions. Here's one atheists always get to me. They'll say, was Jonah swallowed by a whale or a fish? If you read Jonah chapter 1, it says, the Lord prepared a great fish to swallow up Jonah, and he was 3 days and 3 nights in the fish's belly. Okay? Verse 2, chapter 2, verse 1. He was in the fish's belly. But when you read the story in Matthew chapter 12, it says Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly. And the atheist will say, aha, see, the Bible's wrong. A fish is not, a whale's not a fish. Ha ha.
Is Kent Hovind about to come out in favor of the need for us to redefine fish because it's paraphyletic as normally described, being that it excludes things like tetrapods?
Probably.
Yeah, you think he's going to be like,
You're
yes.
just talking about lines on paper.
That's a good point. Never mind. I'm being far too generous. By the way, if you haven't read Neil Shubin's Finding Your Inner Fish, go. I'm not getting paid or anything, but go read it. It is excellent, and you will never look at vertebrate anatomy the same way after you read that.
Aha. Well, in our modern 21st century classification system, a whale is not a fish, but in the biblical classification system, a whale is a fish. If it swims in the water, a dolphin is a fish in biblical classification system. So you can't...
I'm not sure if that's a problem for the Bible or, I don't know. It's just a weird thing. But then again, I'm not going to fault people 2,000 years ago for not having read their Linnaeus that hadn't written anything yet.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
It's fine.
I will agree with Kent that I don't think that constitutes a straight-up contradiction. Doesn't...
How do they define fish or whale back then?
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't look great. It's not a great look, but I'm also a big fan of not using modernity bias when reading historical texts.
Can't take, Carolus Linnaeus's classification system in the last 200 years.
And yeah, Mage Grey Wolf points out, I don't care if it was a fish or a whale, you're not surviving that. Yeah, it's true. That's another point, is that the story does involve required miracles. Like, you can't just survive inside of a large fish or a large whale's belly.
Superimpose that on the Bible and call the Bible wrong. No, it's a whale and a fish are the same thing in biblical classification.
Oh, God. No, Kent, they're not. Not even in biblical classification, because not all fish would be whales. So there's a drink.
About some of the little minor stuff. There's about 500 passages that people commonly say are mistakes in the Bible. And all of them are covered in Ruckman's book. He's a little rude, crude, and unnecessarily mean about it, but he's right, okay? His logic is really good. This one, the atheists love coming up with this one. They'll say, well, do insects have 4 feet? And I say, no. Well, sort of. Because I know where they're headed with that one. In Leviticus chapter 11, it says, these may ye eat of every flying, creeping thing, the locust, the beetle, the grasshopper, but other flying, living things, which have 4 feet,
flying, creeping
shall be an abomination unto you. They'll say, see, insects have 6 legs. Everybody knows that. Moses must have been stupid, or there's a contradiction in the Bible.
That's a fair point. Cheshire Vic says, in biblical classification, the what now? Drink? Yeah, okay, that's fair. The Bible doesn't exactly have a rigorous classification system for organisms.
There's kinds.
Also has sorts.
It has sorts and kinds.
Ah,
What do you need?
look at that.
Well, I'm sure Moses saw plenty of insects during his life, and he knew about the 6 legs. Why did he say 4 feet? Well, insects do have 6 legs, according to our way of thinking. We have a model here of a giant, this is a giant mosquito, okay? Somebody made for us out of copper pipe. And they say, see, it's got 6 legs. Well, sort of. Spiders, do they have 8 legs?
Yes.
Well, we better be cautious here how we define this. If you look at the Bible carefully, you'll see.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and just say that the only reasonable definition for leg is an appendage whose primary purpose is locomotion by pushing against the substrate, so not swimming or flying. What does that seem like a reasonable definition?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
In the book of Proverbs, chapter 30, It says, the spider taketh hold with her hands. Could it be that 4 of them, which point backwards, are considered feet, and the 4 that point forward are considered hands?
Or maybe, Kent, maybe, people have noticed that spiders, like many arachnids, manipulate their food with the appendages called a pedipalp, which isn't any of the legs, and you're just a moron. Because arachnids don't walk with their pedipalps. Not even solifuges do, even though their pedipalps are sized about the same size as any of their legs. The only way to make this argument is to be completely ignorant of arachnid anatomy. And the only reason to have an argument in the first place about arachnid anatomy is to try and defend this biblical passage about spiders using their hands. But the much more obviously correct idea is that spiders just use their pedipalps to manipulate food in order to either wrap it in silk or simply manipulate it to the point where it's in an easy striking range for their fangs. The front 4 feet, or front 2 pairs, are used for walking just like the previous 2 pairs. I don't think the Hebrews were that stupid that they didn't notice that. I somehow have more respect for the ancient Hebrews than Kent does, I guess.
Just because we consider them all 8 legs doesn't...
Yeah, because they're used for walking, Kent. If spiders were going around like fixing VCRs with their front 4 legs, then maybe you would have a point.
mean the spider considers them 8 legs. If a spider's going to do something like, maneuver things around, it's going to use its hands.
Yeah, it's pedipalps. And the spiders that do in fact use legs, which is mostly web-spinning spiders that, catch their web or catch prey in their already spun webs, they tend to use all of their feet because they can, because they're hanging off of a web.
How about the mosquito? Does he have 6 legs or 4 legs and 2 hands?
It has 6 legs and a proboscis and some wings.
Just because he happens to walk on all 6 of them doesn't mean they're all legs. I don't think there's a contradiction.
That's literally what a leg is. I'm taking a drink. Like, what else is a leg other than an appendage used for locomotion by pushing off the substrate? Like, I really want to know what Kent Hovind's definition of a leg is that allows him to say that a mosquito doesn't have 6 of them.
It's for kicking things. And only kicking things. You have to hop on one leg and then kick with the other one.
Well, and the thing is, like, if you look at the morphology on all 6 insect legs, legs, right? They have the same parts. The only difference that you get on any insect is that sometimes some of the pairs are sized differently. And Vandalia 1998 for $2 says, "Are you saying Kent doesn't know biology or history?" Yeah, I am actually. I'm gonna go ahead and be bold and come out as saying Kent Hovind is a moron on all of this.
In the Bible, we could.
And Slim Living Cyborg says, "Look at a scorpion; it has legs and hands." And you know what? That's fair. But you know what those claws are? Those are the pedipalps. It still has 8 legs. Now, you could make the argument that amblypygids and whip scorpions, so maybe whip scorpions, actually only have 6 legs. And then their front pair of what would otherwise be legs are actually more like antennae, but then they still have pedipalps that they use for food manipulation. So, at no point are we getting the 4-footed insect, so Kent Hovind needs to come up with a much better explanation here.
Been forever on supposed contradictions in the Bible. So people say, Brother Hovind, why do you use the King James? Man, it's Old English, nobody can understand it, it's hard to read. I understand all that. And as a brand new Christian, saved out of the Methodist Church, my mom gave me every kind of new Bible version there was. If a new one came out, hey son, you're going to love this one. So I've got a huge collection of all the Bible versions. When I was 16, I had the reviled substandard version of the Bible. It's here someplace, my original copy. But I was reading that, going to church, going to this little independent temperamental fundamental.
What was that?
He said perversion instead of version.
Oh my goodness, that was... Oh, I didn't even...
I was like, wait, something's not right. Yeah, it's a joke.
Oh my goodness.
A right-wing radical chicken-eating Baptist church. And the preacher was banging on the pulpit saying the Bible's the Word of God. And I was making notes in my Revised Standard Version. And after a couple of months, he said, Brother Hovind, you've been a Christian a few months now. It's time you get a Bible. I said, I got a Bible. He said, no, you need a real Bible. I was offended. Okay, I thought, well, I got a Bible. I've been making notes. I've been reading an hour a day. What do you mean? He said, well, there's real problems with that one. So why King James? It's been 37 years now as a Christian of studying this topic. Why? Look at Psalms chapter 12. The words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. Thou shalt keep them, O Lord. Thou shalt preserve them from this generation forever. What does the word them refer back to in that verse? Thou shalt preserve them.
Oh, apparently, according to Tesla Ranger, he said reviled substandard perversion. And yes, Kent Hovind is a Trump supporter. He's currently selling like Trump 2020 t-shirts in his store or whatever. His own custom design, apparently. Although I doubt he's the one who personally designed it.
Well, how terrible does it look?
I don't actually remember. I can't actually picture it.
Preserve what? His words. He's promising he's going to preserve his words, right? How about NIV? The words of the Lord are flawless, like silver purified in a furnace of clay, purified 7 times. O Lord, you will keep us safe and protect us from such people forever. Is that saying the same thing? I mean, I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. It looks to me like somebody's wrong about this one. Okay? What does this mean? Keep us from such people. What people is it talking about? There are very serious...
I'll bet such people is probably pretty clear if you read the preceding and following verses, Kent. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. And I'm going to take a drink because his argument is basically, if it differs from the King James, that must be wrong. No, the King James could be wrong. You have to do things like look at the original language manuscripts. Do some textual criticism to see which reading that you have when you have variant readings is most likely the original. And then, if you're a good scholar, like most people who translate modern Bibles are, whether they're, believing Christians or not, you put footnotes in indicating the other variant readings and their translation.
Differences between these Bible versions. We've got a book. I don't know if I have it here. It's in our library. The guy sent it to me. It took me 6 months to figure out what the title said. I read it, I said, what? Went on to something else. Every time I look at the book, I said, what is this? The title was, Things That Are Different Are Not the Same. I thought, well, duh, why would you title a book like that? Things that are different are not the same. And then I thought, wow, these Bible versions are definitely different, so you can't say they're the same. There are, as far as I understand it, 151 English translations of the Bible right now available. The law...
Okay, so in about 400 years, 150 translations were made. What is that? What does that come out to? How many years between translations on average do we assume there?
I can't do math.
I can't do math either. I'm pulling up a calculator because I'm lazy.
Math mathematician.
So about every 2.5-ish years, a translation comes out. Over the course of 400 years, it actually does not seem like a super unreasonable amount of time between translations. Especially since, manuscript discoveries are being made that whole time. Language is changing the whole time.
Yep. Is you cannot get a copyright and therefore protect your work and therefore get more money unless you have 10% different from the original. Are there 150?
I actually don't know if that's a cutoff point.
I feel like that's a completely made up statistic he's citing.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like, he might be right, and I just don't know.
I'm pretty sure you like for like a title, like a one-word copyrighted whatever. It's got to be.
Well, I guess the real thing we could do is like we could just check various Bible versions and see if they actually are 10% different. Like, is that a typical amount of difference? Because if it is, then we could say that's pretty good reason to say that that's what they're doing. They're just making it just 10% different. But if that's not a typical amount, then I doubt that's the reason. Plus, I don't know if you know this, but you can sell non-copyrighted works and turn a profit. There are a lot of publishing houses that currently are selling public domain works. Like, you can go buy a copy of Dracula. Do you think the publishers of that book are publishing it because they are not expecting to make a profit off of their publication of the public domain work Dracula by Bram Stoker?
Of course not.
Yeah, they're making money off of that public domain work. You can sell public domain works. It's fine. Everyone who's ever published a like manuscript version of like the Greek New Testament, it's public domain. I can go publish my own Greek New Testament right now. No one can stop me. Because guess what? That thing's been in the public domain for millennia.
51 different ways to say each of the verses in the Bible. At some point,
Megan Fox's Giants Boob asks, what about the Jehovah's Witness version of the Bible, which I believe is the New World Translation? The general consensus among actual biblical scholars is basically that it's trash. It is a deliberate mistranslation in many instances. It's not worth serious study, except as an example of propaganda. That is not the case for most modern translations of the biblical text. Most of them are serious attempts to faithfully translate the most likely original reading of the original languages, or at least the original language that is being used. So there are modern Bible translations that are explicitly translating, say, the Septuagint rather than the Masoretic text. But those are still serious scholarly attempts to translate the Septuagint as opposed to the Masoretic text. Just like there are serious scholarly attempts to translate the Dead Sea Scroll versions of the Old Testament or Tanakh books. And for $5 from Dalia in 1998, we have translations might have been more accurate post King James than pre, because now they were using printing presses and not handwriting copies like before. That would keep the manuscripts produced after that more consistent. But the actual increase in accuracy is primarily as a result of increasing finds, basically archaeologically, of more and more manuscripts. So the thing about textual criticism of any text, and it's especially true of the Bible, for which there is a relative plethora of manuscripts compared to most other works that we have from antiquity, is that the more manuscripts you have, the more data you have to compare various textual variants, and that can give you statistical information, as well as just downright prima facie evidence as to what older readings are. Because manuscript variants tend to be like genetic mutations, right? So if a particular codex or manuscript gains a variant, so, sorry. For instance, let's say this particular scribe in question happens in this one instance to abbreviate theos as theta sigma with a little squiggle on top, which is a common abbreviation for theos in Greek. That will likely be copied directly by the scribes who copy their manuscripts from that one. Or let's say, as one of the more common textual variants is, sometimes a word gets omitted, because in Greek, a lot of times you'll get a few words in a row that all have the same case ending, because adjectives will agree in person, or not person, but number and gender with the nouns to which they're attached. And in a lot of cases, if they're the same declension, that'll end up being the same ending. So sometimes the scribe will look down, copy a word, look back up, see another word with the same ending, and he'll have skipped one or more words. And then he'll keep writing. That's likely to be passed down. And so by comparing essentially the mutations in the text, we can derive text families from biblical manuscripts and then go back and try to figure out the most likely, drink for Godzilla, state of the quote-unquote common ancestor of all these manuscripts. So that vast increase in the number of available manuscripts has given textual criticism a much bigger data field to look at in terms of recovering the most likely original reading. And that's been the big push for that has increased the accuracy of modern Bible translations as opposed to, say, the King James. It's a very complicated field. There's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of known common types of manuscript errors. Which kinds there are depend on which language is being copied down. So, for instance, we have a manuscript history for the Latin Vulgate, the Septuagint, for the Masoretic text, for the various Greek manuscript families of the New Testament. each of these groups of texts has, in many cases, several hundred nearly complete texts and thousands of fragmentary manuscripts. So there's actually a surprisingly big data field for trying to figure out what was originally written down in the Bible. And while it isn't, no one can say for 100% confident what the actual original manuscripts of any of these books look like, there's actually a pretty strong consilience of both believing and non-believing scholarship on what the text probably said at first. And it's not the text that you could recover from essentially back translating the King James. Because one of the problems with the King James is that they didn't really work off of a single Greek or Hebrew text. They kind of imported things like previous traditions from the Vulgate, various contradictory Greek texts, and a lot of use of the Masoretic. So, yeah, as a result, the King James is not the most accurate Bible translation, although it was a darn good effort for the 17th century. So, then there's my... Oh! Drink for Godzilla!
That's pretty cool stuff.
That's my crazy epic diversion onto textual criticism, and why it's a thing, and why it's important if you want to have a serious scholarly discussion about the text of the Bible. There you go.
Point, you're going to have to stop saying it the right way and say it the wrong way just to make it different, just to get your copyright, just to get your money. Love of money, root of all evil. Here's...
No. No. Because the thing is, you can have legitimate disagreements about which reading of the original text is actually original, right? So there are cases where the original reading is still very... Drink for Godzilla. It's still very much in dispute. Now, to be fair, very few of these areas where the text is legitimately in dispute is it super significant to the meaning of the text as a whole. The general meaning of almost every biblical text is fairly well known. Most of these variants are fairly minor. In fact, some of the variants aren't even translatable. Like, remember I gave you the example of maybe a particular scribe abbreviates theos as a theta sigma with a little squiggle on top. You literally can't translate that into English. Because both theos written out, theta, epsilon, omicron, sigma, and theos as an abbreviation, the translation for both is just God. What are you going to do with that? So, yeah, it's not the case that 150 Bible translations, some of them have to be quote-unquote wrong. Some of them are, mostly because they're not all of equal quality, but it's not a logical requirement. So Fernando Katakai, I think, I always forget how to say that, sorry, says, I was told the Masoretic texts were corrupted versions of the Bible. So, that's a little bit on the controversial side. I think it would be an exaggeration to call them corrupted. They are currently the standard Hebrew versions of the Tanakh used in most Jewish circles, and they are the most popular option for translating the Old Testament in most Protestant circles. They do, in fact, post-date all of the New Testament works. So what happened basically was, in the early Christian centuries, a number of Jewish scholars got together to codify what would later become the Old Testament canon of the Jews and modern Protestants. And they collected... Oh! Make a drink. They collected this text, set a standardized consonantal text, and then they also invented the system of pointing, which allows a consonantal text that's already been written to have little dots and dashes and like T symbols and whatnot inserted into it in order to give an unambiguous pronunciation guide, because Hebrew traditionally was written with only consonants and long vowels indicated, and long vowels were confusingly written with letters that were also consonants in other texts or other contexts. So it could get a little tricky, and the way that people remembered the actual literal exact pronunciation was basically by tradition. You would be told exactly what the reading was. And so they set out to write this down. But there is some reason to believe that some of what was done there was done explicitly to try to diminish the ability of Christians to argue for their religious perspective from the text of the Old Testament, which was much easier from the Septuagint than it ended up being from the later Masoretic text. It's also curious that there are cases where the Septuagint and the Masoretic text differ from each other, and when you compare the two texts to the reading in, say, the Dead Sea Scrolls actually tends to more often than not side with the Septuagint. The degree to which that's deliberate and the degree to which would constitute a corruption, I'm not well versed enough on that topic to really give a terribly informed opinion. I will say this: the Masoretic text is somewhat suspect because of its explicitly polemical nature. I don't think that means that it's a worthless text or that it doesn't give a broadly accurate reading of the original Hebrew. I do think, however, there is value in consulting with the Septuagint and comparing it to the Masoretic text when trying to figure out the likely original reading of Old Testament books. So, yeah. And Dunning-Kruger, yeah. I mean, most of the manuscript variants are variant spellings and things like that. But what that says for biblical inerrancy, I don't. That's not an issue here for me. I'm neither here to defend nor to deny biblical inerrancy. I will say that there are definitely some biblical interpretations that are wrong, and Kent's is one of them.
A quick story. We could take an hour on this one, but yeah, right after the time of Christ, the disciples were writing their books, and they were being persecuted and spreading out, and people were copying these letters and copying the Gospels and spreading them out. Persecution hit the church, and they spread out everywhere. And for the next 1,000 years, it was horrible persecution against the church.
What? No, there's never been a 1,000-year-long period of persecution. Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire in, like, the early 5th century, and it was officially tolerated by, like, the early 4th century. Actually, no, it was, like, the late 4th century when it became the official religion, and it was tolerated by the beginning of the 4th century. So, no, there were various variant Christian groups who were variously persecuted by Roman authorities for not being in line with the imperial church. But say that Christianity was being suppressed for 1,000 years is just not even close to true, and I'm taking a drink.
And if they caught the heretics, the Christians, they would burn them at the stake and burn their Bibles.
Oh, all of the Christians were quote-unquote heretics. Because Kent Hovind doesn't like Catholicism, and he confuses all of Christian history from basically the 3rd century on with Catholicism. Okay, that's also dumb.
Well, people were spreading the Word of God around, making all kinds of copies. It takes about 10 months to write out a copy of the Bible using a pen. Now, you don't even have a good ink pen. You got a feather, and you got to keep dipping it in the ink.
There weren't just feathers. There were metal-nibbed pens. Feathers are easier.
And you keep cutting a new point on it. You don't even have a good ink pen, nor do you have good paper to write on. Lumpy parchment, stuff like that, or leather.
No, there was high-quality parchment being produced, and most writing was done on papyrus, Kent. I mean, just say something accurate about history, and I'm going to go get a new drink, so we're going to do our intermission here. I just... You know how every once in a while I mention that I have a history degree?
Mm-hmm.
This is annoying an entirely different part of my brain than it normally does. Like, normally I'm all on, like, biology and paleontology mode, and now I'm, like, flipping to history mode, and I'm like, it's just as bad! But it doesn't have to be.
I mean, I don't know any better, but when I hear you give these explanations, yeah, I'm not surprised at all that Kent never did any historical research either.
No, it's just... It's really, really bad.
And he never taught history in high school. He only taught math and science, so he's even worse at history.
That's true, yeah. He is even worse at history. Alright, so I am going to grab myself a refreshed beverage, because I'm down to mostly second drink here, which is what happens when the ice melts. Like second drink. But I'm going to get an actual second drink. So, talk to you guys in a bit.
Merch store. Links are in the description. Please help. Dinosaurs all over YouTube are depending on you to help them through the hunting off-season.
Oh, Nani? Dare? Oh, Ojira desu ka? Hai, Gojira-san. Hai. All right, we are back. So first I want to answer a quick question from Dunning-Kruger. What paleontologists think about protofeathers on larger theropods? At Depper Dino, don't mean to change the subject. Nah, it's fine. So the question of how big theropods were that had feathers is a little open. So Eutyrannus is the largest known theropod with protofeathers, and it's a pretty big animal. I mean, it's not T-Rex by any means, although it is a Tyrannosaur. So basically, the name of the game has been don't rule it out, but the larger the theropod is, the less likely it was to have any prominent protofeather covering. Just because you get this thing called gigantothermy, where the larger you are, the more easy it is to keep your body temperature up, but the harder it is to shed heat. That's why elephants have those, or African elephants have those gigantic ears to help them shed heat, because of problems with gigantothermy. And one of the things you notice, at least in mammals, is that pelage tends to decrease as body mass increases beyond sort of the minimum to be considered like macrofauna. So like rhinos, hippos, elephants, whales, obviously, all have very, very low amounts of hair. And there's reason to think that might have been the case for protofeathers and large-bodied theropods. Plus, Eutyrannus was from an area where snow wasn't uncommon. So, I mean, this is a cold weather animal. So, yeah, it's iffy. But the other thing I want to point out is, you know how Ken Hovind was saying that the real Christians were always on the run for 1,000 years and spreading the Bible and whatnot?
Yeah, they were persecuted for 1,000 years.
I realized, so Kent is a Baptist, and Baptists are already a bit on the fringe in terms of Protestant Christianity. And there's a fringe version of Baptists who believe that there was a small remnant of people who were essentially proto-Baptists all throughout history, who were meeting in secret and singing Baptist-y songs and having a Baptist theology, meeting under the noses of the Catholic Church for 1,000 or whatever years. And I'm pretty sure that's what he's getting at. I think he's one of those remnant-type Baptists who thinks that the origins of the Baptists predate even the Protestant Reformation. There's been this
predate Christ.
Probably. So I think that's actually what he's driving at. I don't know, but as I was going to get my drink, I was thinking about, like, because Baptists have a number of explanations for the origin of baptism or Baptists as a movement, because it's actually not well recorded in history. It's a bit of a mystery. They kind of just start popping up in places. And that's one of the explanations, is they predate the Protestant Reformation. It just gave them the confidence to come out as being the true Christians after the Protestant Reformation, which broke the power of the Catholic Church. And so I think that's what he's going for. But yeah, there's literally no evidence to support that, and there's plenty of evidence to say that's probably not true. We don't have any. So the very hungry singularity. So Baptists are fringe in terms of the totality of Protestant Christianity. They're very much not fringe in certain geographic areas of the United States. But when you consider like mainline Protestant groups like Methodists or Presbyterians or Congregationalists or Lutherans and things like that, Baptists are definitely, they're not quite as fringe as, say, Anabaptists, which they share a similar name with, but they're not Anabaptists. But if you talk to most of the serious scholarship in mainline Protestantism, Baptists are not exactly regarded as being within the mainstream for Protestant Christianity. But then again, U.S. Protestantism has some pretty fringe areas to it, even if in certain geographic areas they are very, very common. So yeah, I would say that overall, in terms of Protestant scholarship, which is what I tend to actually more care about, yeah, Baptists are seen as pretty fringe and pretty not to be taken overly seriously.
But anyway, with all the obstacles they had, plus, being persecuted, it took about 10 months to handwrite a copy of the Bible. Well, they're making all these...
Oh, no, they're definitely not a big majority overall, the Very Hungry Singularity. They are really big in the southern United States and the Bible Belt, but outside of there, they are actually fairly scarce on the ground. Yeah, so if you go to places like New England, which is an old Congregationalist stronghold, or you go to actually many of the places outside of the Deep South where the various Anglican communities are still reasonably strong in terms of numbers, or you go to places like the Midwest where there were a lot of Lutherans that settled. Yeah, Baptists, they're there, but there's not nearly as many of them.
These copies. By the time you get to 15 and 1600s, persecution lets up, and so people decided to collect the Bible copies together from all over the world and compare them and put it into English. Now keep in mind, some of these copies of the Bible had not seen each other in 1,000 years. There might have been people in France that were copying the Bible, and people in Africa copying the Bible, and people in China copying the Bible.
Okay, so he's imagining that all of these proto-Baptists, the real Christians, are the ones copying the Bible, and that's what was compared. But I'm going to take a drink, because that's stupid. Because this is something we talked about before. Remember Providence, Bent?
Yes.
All these manuscripts have provenance, and almost all of them come from Eastern Orthodox or Roman Catholic monasteries and libraries. Not secret home churches being led by proto-Baptists. So the manuscripts that we have were preserved by the Catholics and the Orthodox and the, I guess, Oriental Orthodox, because it's not technically the same group as the Eastern Orthodox. And in some cases by some Nestorians, but that's been a fairly minor component to the manuscript tradition. So,
and you can only use a book so long and it wears out. I've got, I don't know how many, absolutely worn out Bibles, okay? I think I have probably 5 or 6 that I've just they're shot, okay? If you're a book that's in active use is going to have a limited life. And let's just pick a number and say if you were really careful with your scrolls, I mean treat it real carefully, you might make a scroll last 300 years and still use it every day, just for illustration. Well, so in 300 years, your original is worn out, it's trash, it's junk, you throw it away because you now have 800 copies of this thing, or a certain large number of copies. Then you take those copies and make copies. And after maybe 1,000 years, you might be on your 4th or 5th generation from the original, but that's perfectly fine. It doesn't matter as long as the copying process was accurate. And a good way to check that copying process and see was it accurate is after each of these, the French ones and the German ones and the English ones and the Chinese ones, each go 5 generations. Now let's get the 5th generation and compare them all and see how accurate they are.
Okay, there was an early Christian presence in China. It goes all the way back to at least the 8th century, and then it continued for a few hundred years. But no, Chinese copies of the Bible did not in any significant way contribute to our modern corpus of biblical manuscripts, because the Christians in China, who, by the way, were Nestorians, a group that Kent would consider to be extremely heretical, in fact, virtually all of modern Christianity would, were wiped out after heavy persecution after it was decided that they were in fact a foreign influence. Although before that, they in many cases were pretty influential and were in a lot of cases advisors to imperial courts in China. So yeah, there's actually an interesting history about ancient Christians in China. We have artifacts and inscriptions written by them in Chinese. There's a whole lot of cool stuff there, but Kent, no, their biblical manuscripts did not go into any significant portion of the modern corpus of biblical manuscripts. Just stop. Just stop.
And that's what happened in the 15 and 1600s. They got all these scrolls together, found 5,000.
They weren't scrolls. Oh, I'm taking another drink. They were codices, Kent. Europeans had figured out the book by then. The book was a common form of holding texts for like 1,000 years at this point. Codices, Kent. There's a reason that all these biblical manuscripts that are famous have the word codex at the front of them. Like Codex Vaticanus and Codex Sinaiticus. Because they were codices.
Copies of the Bible that survived the persecution, and they were identical in everything except spelling. People's names, you know, Peter and Pedro, stuff like that had changed. So they said, man, God truly preserved His Word. This is it. This is word for word exactly. He preserved it.
But it wasn't exactly. All those manuscripts have textual variants for the reasons that they hadn't seen each other, and that once a textual variant is introduced into the text, it tends to persist because of careful copying. I do not understand how
logic to, not just history.
Well, the thing that bugs me is that if you were to come to me and say, hey, where do you think Kent would be the least inaccurate? I would have normally been like, I guess the text of the Bible itself, right? He probably has a decent handle on at least the bare literal words that are there. But he doesn't. He's just got nothing. Like, he does not even understand the actual diversity in the text of manuscripts of the Bible. He doesn't even know what physical form they mostly take up. Because virtually none of them are scrolls. They tend to be papyri fragments or codices. There are very few actual scrolls involved in this. T. Lane says, the Codex Astartes. Wait, that's not right. The Codex Astartes does not support this action, by the way.
So, meanwhile, down in Egypt, there was a group of folks, sort of like Jehovah's Witnesses. I've got the Jehovah's Witness Bible here. They were a cult. They came to be known as the Alexandrians. The Alexandrians...
Oh my God, take a drink. The Alexandrians weren't some cult. They were a theological school prevalent, but not exclusive, in Alexandria that took as the most important meaning various metaphorical or somewhat mystical, but usually not very mystical, meanings of the Bible, especially the Old Testament. And they were big on what's called typological interpretations, where they would look at aspects of the Old Testament and see a type or symbolic connection to other parts of the scriptures in the New Testament. So, for example, the Alexandrians would be big on comparing the way that the Ark of the Covenant was a vessel that physically carried the Word of God to the Virgin Mary, who physically bore the incarnate Word of God. And that was a big thing, and they were less concerned with the literal meaning, but they weren't a cult in any normal sense of the word. They were a theological and philosophical school of Christianity, which was never really like denounced or anathematized or anything like that. Seriously, yeah, Monk Mayfair is right. F in the chat for my brain at this point. I mean, it's hard to even have a cursory knowledge of Christian history and think that any of this makes sense.
Did not believe in the deity of Christ. They didn't believe in the bodily resurrection.
Yes, they did believe in both of those. I'm taking another drink, Ken. God.
They didn't believe in a lot of Christian things, kind of like Jehovah's Witnesses today.
Oh, the Jehovah's Witnesses do believe in the resurrection. I'm taking another drink. I'm gonna die.
Hope you're thirsty.
I just can't with this.
So they made their own copy of the Bible, changing things they didn't like.
You've not demonstrated that there were any intentional changes in Alexandrian codices. There's no evidence of it. And yeah, over time, Constantinopolitan codices tended to predominate over Alexandrian, But that wasn't because the Alexandrian codices were seen as bad or anything. It's just they were mostly being maintained by people who were not members of the official imperial church, because this was post the Fourth Ecumenical Council, where the, by population, much larger Oriental Orthodox Church split away from the imperial church, which had signed on to the declaration of the Fourth Ecumenical Council, whereas the ones in Egypt didn't, forming the unofficial but still concurrent and only real surviving Christian church in Egypt and Ethiopia and Eritrea, the Oriental Orthodox Church, which is currently headed by Pope Tawadros, if I remember correctly. Or wait, did he die? I don't know, he might have died. Whatever. The Pope of Alexandria.
Made about 6,000 changes. The primary guy in this cult was a guy named Origen. He was the leader of this cult in late 2nd century, 3rd century. The only mention of Alexandria in the Bible is when they were disputing with Stephen, arguing with the real Christians. And if you trust the principle of first mention, which I think is very important.
I'm sorry, they were arguing with Stephen, and you said, Stephen, the first martyr, Stephen, the one in Acts, right?
Right.
But Kent's previous slide said that the quote-unquote Alexandrian cult started in 230.
Yeah, they're really old.
Apparently, Stephen lived up to a very ripe old age before he was stoned to death.
No. He was stoned to death at that time. What are they, Alexandrians?
Yeah.
They were like 400 or 500 years old.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I
don't know what took them so long, but
all of this is just beyond stupid.
Then that'll be important to you to say, wow, the only mention of these folks is bad. And so anything out of Alexandria, anything out of Egypt, period, in the Bible seems to be bad, you know?
Nope,
but Origen started this, was the primary guy in this cult. They made copies of their Bible also.
No, Origen wasn't the primary guy in an Alexandrian cult. He was an always controversial theologian. He was never actually condemned by Christendom at large, although many of his teachings were rejected by Christianity as a whole, especially his strict universalism, where he said that no one would ultimately be damned, but everyone would be saved. Instead, a looser version of universalism was allowed. I don't know what its current status is in the Catholic Church, because they don't talk about it a lot. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, they do actually talk about it, and it's still an acceptable belief, which is not that all will be saved, but that all can be saved even after they die. That was his most controversial thing. He had some other controversial things, like advocating for the literal interpretation of the it's better to be a eunuch than to sin bits, where he did in fact castrate himself, which was later forbidden for Christians to do. But no, he was not some cult leader who was a central figure to Alexandrian Christianity. He was always on the fringe of even Alexandrian Christian theology. But he was famous because he was very prolific, and at the very least, he made arguments that to the Christians around him were very at least interesting, even if they often disagreed.
With their changes in it. And some of them survived. In 350 AD, several copies were made, and
there's also no evidence that Origen founded any kind of manuscript family. There just isn't.
3 of those still survive today. One was found in the Vatican Library, and it's called Vaticanus. One,
actually, Monk Mayfair, who points out castration forbidden, but foreskin's still nasty. Got it. Actually, the common practice of circumcision among Christians in the West is actually a fairly recent phenomenon. That's not the historical typical practice for Christianity. And it was really introduced into especially North American life, primarily not as a religious thing, unless you were Jewish, of course, but primarily as various means of doing things like decreasing instances of masturbation, which, spoiler alerts, that doesn't work, as well as alleged hygienic reasons. Basically, it was medical quackery that persists to this day, that had some backing from scriptures, but yeah, that's actually not the traditional Christian practice to circumcise. So, yeah, it's a weird thing that nowadays we think of it as a thing that's associated with Christianity, but historically it really wasn't.
was found in Alexandria, Egypt, and is called Alexandrus in the Latin, and one was found in Sinai Peninsula in a monastery. There's this old monastery at the foot of this mountain that some pharaoh or some princess said that's Mount Sinai, and it's not Mount Sinai, by the way. But
I would challenge you as to how you know, but whatever.
she said, "Oh, that's Mount Sinai." Okay, yes, ma'am. And so they call it Mount. They still call it Mount Sinai. There's still a monastery there. It's not in Sinai Peninsula. It's in Arabia. Read Galatians 4.
No, the Sinai Monastery is not in Arabia.
But they're in this trash can in this old monastery.
You read Galatians 4 and let me know if it helps.
Okay.
I can't right now.
This guy was visiting. He said, "What's this old scroll?" He said, "Oh, we don't know. It's been in there for years." You know. He pulled it out. It was a copy of the Bible, if you can call it that, from 380 or 350 A.D. And so that one's called Sinaiticus. Well, these three scrolls do not agree with each other.
Yeah, it's Codex Sinaiticus, Kent. Codex. It's not a stamped scroll. Taking a drink.
On anything. Nor do they agree with the real Bible. Okay, they're all different.
I mean, they don't agree with the real Bible. Even comparing Alexandrian codices to Constantinopolitan codices, the amount of actual textual variation is pretty darn low. And the thing is that when you reconstruct original most likely readings from various Constantinopolitan and Latin manuscripts, actually doesn't differ significantly from the Alexandrian in most areas. So yeah, there is in fact good reason to think that the Alexandrian codices are reasonable places to look for at least additional textual data. You don't have to go with the Alexandrian readings, and in fact most modern Bible translations don't, exclusively default to the Alexandrian readings. But you can't just dismiss that as evidence because of your made-up version of the history of Alexandria.
The Catholics, or the monks, translated these three ancient scrolls into Latin centuries ago, and it became known as the Latin Vulgate. Vulgate for
No! Oh my god. Take another drink for that one, because the Vulgate translation predates the discovery of Codex Sinaiticus by a lot. The Vulgate was primarily translated from the Masoretic text and then current Greek manuscripts, which were primarily coming out of Constantinopolitan and other textual manuscript traditions that were not Alexandrian. I can't.
That's like you got history wrong for the 9th time.
I don't even know. I just hate this. As someone who spent a lot of time studying Christian history, this is really, really painful in a new way.
Yeah.
This is a different kind of hurt than is normally the case.
We're all learning so much about stuff we don't normally talk about.
Well, that's true. I mean, I almost never get to talk about Christian history on this channel, even though I find it really fascinating and a lot of interesting stuff happened. But it never comes up. So I'm glad that it's coming up. But was he about to say Vulgate means vulgar? He might have been. So vulgar itself actually comes from a Latin word that means common, which is also what Vulgate means because it was being translated into the common language at the time, which was still more or less late classical / vulgar Latin.
Vulgar means the common language, okay?
Megan Fox Giant Boobs says it's Istanbul, not Constantinople, Dapper. Sorry, I had to. Man, you're just asking for a timeout. That's what that is.
Then the Catholic, by the way, the Latin Vulgate was a really good translation of a bad book. Then the Catholics came along in
I love how he says that like it isn't a translation of basically the same text that were used to prepare the King James Version. In fact, the King James Version, in some cases, consulted the Vulgate. Like, I'm not going to say the Vulgate is the best translation of the Bible there is, because it's not, but come on.
1882 and translated the Latin Vulgate into English with the Douay Confraternity or the Douay-Rheims version of the Bible.
Accurate.
And that was a really...
That is true. The Douay-Rheims is more or less a translation of the Vulgate. I'll take a drink.
Good translation of a bad book. Then two guys named Westcott and Hort came along. I've got their book here someplace on the table. Westcott and Hort came along, and they were going to make a new, here we go, the Westcott Hort Only Controversy. A little bitty booklet about, if you want to study this, just $2 from our ministry. Westcott and Hort were two Greek scholars. I don't know if they were even Christian or not. They probably claimed that they were, like a lot of people do. Okay, but they took these three old ancient manuscripts. They didn't agree with each other, but their thinking was, these are older, therefore they are better.
The Westcott Hort does prioritize the older Alexandrian codices, but it does not just reference those. And modern translations do not just reference the Westcott Hort text. And the Westcott Hort text itself includes textual notes about variants. So even it is not a single text with a single reading. I have a copy of the Westcott Hort Greek New Testament. It has textual notes in the body of the text to reference to the footnotes, so you can get the textual variants that aren't in the main body of the text. And modern English translations don't just ignore those, nor do they just use the Westcott Hort.
Well, I'll go along with the older part. I agree with that, but that doesn't mean they're better. But they synthesized them into one new Greek manuscript and sold it to the world in 1875 and said, we have the oldest and best manuscripts.
And it's been updated several times since. I don't even remember what edition it's in now. It's probably not, my copy probably isn't even the most recent edition. And in each case, it's updated because of new textual discoveries that are being incorporated into the text to both give the most likely original text reading in the main body, as well as adding more and more to the footnotes. There are pages in my copy of the Westcott Hort New Testament where the vast majority of the page, I'm talking like 80% of the page, is footnotes. Like, this is not just some simple, oh, here's a synthesis Greek New Testament. And do you think Kent has ever even looked at the text of the Westcott? He might own a copy.
No.
You think he's ever actually looked at it?
No. I think he heard someone say something once and he's repeating it because it sounded good to him.
I mean, I doubt that Kent has any knowledge of first century Greek. Now, I don't think
there's any reason to think he would.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm some kind of expert on first century Greek. But I can at least usually puzzle it out if I want to with my first century Greek lexicon handy and a copy of a Greek text in first century Greek. It takes a while, and I'm bad at it. But I can at least puzzle it out, and so there's a reason for me to have this book. Monk Mayfair, I do actually like that song, though. Same for Icarus. It's a good song.
Available now for you to translate. And they got the oldest ones all right. The oldest ones that survived is all. Doesn't mean better. Then people started taking their Westcott and Hort version and translating it into English. First one done, 1881, as the Revised Standard. Then the American Standard, the Revised Standard, the revised version first. Then the Jehovah's Witness Bible, the New World Translation, done in 1950. This was a good translation, fairly good translation of a bad book.
No, the New World Translation is not a good translation of a bad book. It's a bad translation of a book, whether bad or not. It's an intentionally deceptive translation of the Greek text. I defy you to find me someone who's not a Jehovah's Witness who will defend the New World Translation. It's just trash. It's complete trash. And I know I don't normally take a position on theology, but this isn't theology. This is just straight up, is this an accurate rendition of any text? The answer for the New World Translation is no. So I'll agree with Kent Hovind that it's a bad book. But I don't think Kent could defend that position.
Then the New American Standard, the NIV, the Good News, the Amplified, the Living Bible, all of those, and I have a lot of them. There's the New American Standard. I think the guys who are doing this are sincere.
Wait, is that the same copy of the New American Standard that I have? Like the same edition? Awesome. It might be. It looks a lot like mine. Oh, goodness. I don't want a Kent Hovind autographed Bible. But no, that looks a lot like my copy of the New American Standard. Huh.
Dedicated, highly intelligent, godly Christians who are translating the wrong book and don't even know it. There are basically only 2 Bibles in the world, in English. The one's translated from what's called the majority text, the King James, of which there are now 64.
Nope. The King James was not translated from the majority text. There is, in fact, no single Greek manuscript or even conciliatory version of a bunch of Greek manuscripts that directly correlates the New Testament found in the King James Version. The majority text is actually what most Bibles end up being. Or not, okay, let me back up a little bit. The majority text is considered in all modern Bible translations. It is not always used as the default reading when there is good reason not to use it, but it is always considered. The avian theropod asks where my feathers are. We have extensive skin impressions for Ceratosaurus, and there are no feathers on any area for which we have skin impressions, which actually covers a huge portion of the body. So, sorry, Ceratosaurus almost certainly had no feathers.
1,000 manuscripts. At the time King James guys did it, they only had 5,000. And then there's the whole other family of Bibles, all translated from the Westcott and Hort.
No,
So you have 2 choices.
that's not how that works.
The question is not, is it a good translation? The question is, what are they translating? Okay? The excellent book by Westcott and Hort, if you want to read about that. Here's, for instance, NIV, Acts chapter 8. Let's see, Adam, read verse 37 to me. Acts 8:37. You can't do it.
Yes, you can. It's in the footnotes. Okay, look. Acts 36. As they traveled along the road, they came to some water, and the eunuch said, "Look, here is water. Why shouldn't I be baptized?" D. What do you think that D
What's
refers to? Yeah, that's the footnotes.
What?
You can absolutely read the 37th verse. Because that's what that D is. You think it's just there for funsies? You think that the people who translated the NIV were just like, let's just toss in some superscript letters. Sounds fun. Just every once in a while. No, it's because it's a reference to the footnotes. Monk Mayfair, yes. Chip Kent.
It's not there. There is no Acts 8:37.
Yes, there is. I'm not going to say it again.
They removed it, and they removed the number, okay? Now, in the New
They didn't remove it. They moved it. There's a difference.
American Standard, they at least put a footnote. In Acts 8:37,
Oh, he does know that there's a footnote. Oh no, he's saying this is the New American Standard. He's pretending the NIV doesn't have this footnote.
I'll look that up too.
Like, he showed the reference to the footnote. I'm gonna drink. That really, really annoys me. Because look, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh, the NIV is the bestest Bible version ever. It's popular. I'm not entirely sure why, but it does not just skip over 37.
it says, see footnote. But the verse is gone. Down at the bottom it says, late manuscripts insert verse 37. No. Guys, you got it all wrong. Those supposed early manuscripts you're going on are the ones that took it out. It wasn't that the later guys inserted it, it's that the earlier guys took one out, that's all.
Yeah, except that textual variants tend to propagate forward. It's a very well-established fact. The earlier the manuscripts are, the more similar they tend to be to each other. Because just like organisms in evolution, mutations tend to propagate forward. They don't propagate back. So in every instance that we have, the earlier you get, the more similar the codices.
Over 200 verses totally missing from the NIV. There's a good book,
Megan Fox's Giant Boob says he doesn't realize that the verses are essentially arbitrary and have been agreed on arbitrarily. That is largely true in the New Testament. It's less true in Hebrew. If you're looking at translations of the Hebrew Old Testament, versification tends to correspond directly to sentence. Each Hebrew sentence just tends to be a verse. Which is actually something you can see if you're looking at like if you've got a copy of the Masoretic text, which is again what most Protestants are using to translate their Old Testament. Basically, every time a sentence stops, there's a verse number that fix through. The chapters are a bit more arbitrary, except in the Book of Psalms, where basically each psalm is a poem, and so the end of the poem becomes the chapter division. The chapter divisions and versification are much more arbitrary in Greek, but they've still been largely agreed upon, and they tend to come close to the sentence level ish. You know, it's a little iffy. The chapter identifications, though, are very arbitrary. So, it actually is the case that manuscript variants that are at the verse level tend to actually omit or include the entire verse, because there's an effort to have the verse be like a meaningful unit of text when they were created. So it's not entirely arbitrary, but there is a large degree of arbitrariness in where the verses and chapters are. T. Lane says, "Can we just toss Kent off a bridge, Dapper?" No, we can't. That's not okay.
Understandable History of the Bible. Sam Gipp, great big book, excellent book, really good on understanding the history of how we got our Bible. Or Gail Riplinger's book, In Awe of Thy Word. It's like 1,200.
Gail Riplinger is a crazy woman who has visions from God, where God tells her how bad Bible translations are by the way, giving her the wrong names for Bible translations. In her book, New World Bible Translations or Bible Versions or something like that, she actually misnames versions of the Bible, and when called out on this, she said that's what God calls them.
Wow.
Yeah, that's who Kent Hovind's source is. Gail Riplinger. Gail Riplinger is not someone anyone should be taking seriously for anything. She is an absolute crazy woman.
100 pages, and it's only like $15 or $18 or something. Really, really a good one.
I mean, it says $24 on your slide, Kent, so I don't know. I mean, just either fix your slide or say what it says on your slide. I don't know. Oh, okay. You got Boquet. Okay. Okay, but Monk Mayfair, I can't do that much Klingon in every stream. You're like the only person here who speaks any Klingon besides me. I guess Ben has a little bit.
I don't know nearly that much.
Yeah.
There are many, many books that we offer on the King James controversy. If you want one that's toned down and kind of, you know, sweet, gentle, and mild, this would be it, by Sam Gipp. The Answer Book. Excellent book on why King James. The language of the King James. Why do they use these old words, thee and thou and stuff like that? Oh, there's a good reason for it.
Because in 1611, that was still in current use. I mean, like, why does that need an explanation? That's just weird.
For that. But the whole thinking that older is better is simply wrong. And how is Satan going to use these new versions toward bringing in his New World Order?
What?
Well, this one, the New Age Bible Versions, is excellent by Gail Ripley.
That's the book I was talking about. How is Satan going to use the NIV to bring about the New World Order? I can't even imagine it, because I have no idea what the connection would be. Nope, I'm just going to keep going.
PhD in English. So older does not mean better. I have worn out many Bibles over my 37 years of being a Christian. Older doesn't mean better. So there are more manuscripts of the Bible than any other old book. Homer's Iliad, for instance, only has about 650 manuscripts. In 1946, they found 24,000 more manuscripts. Then the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, and now they have 64,000 manuscripts that support the King James, and 3 complete manuscripts and 46 fragments that support the Alexandrian.
Wrong. In fact, actually, the Dead Sea Scrolls do not support the King James overall, mostly because, as I've said before, they actually tend to support the readings from the Septuagint more often than the Masoretic text when there's a difference. And the King James hews very closely to the Masoretic text. So, just on that one, take a drink.
Then the Isaiah scroll found in the Dead Sea Scrolls was actually 1,000 years older than the other manuscripts. So there's plenty of good books available on that. There are all kinds of things we could talk about on the problems with the King James, or problems with the other versions, like 2 Samuel 21. Who killed Goliath? Who killed Goliath? David killed Goliath. 2 Samuel 21 says, Elhanan, the son of his dad, slew the brother of Goliath. NIV says, Elhanan, the son of the same guy, killed Goliath. This is an error. Okay?
Well, I mean, I don't want to pronounce that name either, do you?
Yeah, but the way he delivered the line made it seem like he was trying to make a joke.
Oh, okay, I'll take a drink for a joke.
I'm not saying, I think he was trying to make a joke there.
No, that's very fair.
It's wrong. They blew it, all right? They left out verses, and we could scan through some of these. All these verses are left out. There's a list on the website avpublications.com of verses that are left out. 200 verses are simply gone. And those that are still in there, many times are changed to something meaning totally different. For instance, Hosea chapter 11, Judah yet ruleth with God. NIV, Judah is unruly against God. Would you...
Yeah, but Kent, it isn't the same as the KJV. Is not a reason to reject it. You have to show me why you think your text actually is a more accurate translation. You have to actually go into the textual criticism. You have to do the comparison. You have to do the reconstruction of the probable ancestor text. You have to show the manuscript data. But you're not going to.
Of course he's not.
He couldn't. Now look, I do not know enough Hebrew or Greek to go do the full textual manuscripts, like textual criticism and all that. Like, I don't. I really don't. I have dabbled in both languages. I know enough to basically refute Kent Hovind's mistranslations of them, but that's about it.
say that is saying the same thing? Judah is also unruly against God? It's not...
Oh, RJM Truth asks a very important question. He says, if there are thousands of languages on Earth, why would there be only one language on the Klingon homeworld? For first, there isn't only one.
They didn't have a Tower of Babel.
Well, perhaps. But I'm going to point out, first, there is not only one language on the Klingon homeworld. However, the official Klingon language that we get in Star Trek, especially in the Star Trek movies, as well as the new Trek stuff and the Klingon dictionary, is the official language of the Empire, which is based off of the current ruler and his dialect. There is, according to the Klingon dictionary, other Klingon languages which are not being detailed in that work. Second, we've been seeing in recent years on Earth a dramatic increase in the rate at which languages are going extinct, which is the same as a dramatic shrinking in just the total number of languages spoken. So, given that the Klingon Empire has spent well over 2 millennia with at least a united planet-wide government and dominant culture, it's not actually unreasonable to think that they would have had an even greater rate of language loss. So, there's two things. There's probably far fewer Klingon languages extant in the, say, 24th century than we would have on 21st century Earth. And what we're getting in the Klingon dictionary and Duolingo and whatnot is not actually, according to the lore, the only Klingon language. So, there you go. That's a twofold answer.
Saying the same thing. Thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, Genesis 27. That's one of the blessings. Your dwelling shall be away from earth's richness. Away from the fertility of the earth shall be your dwelling. They're saying the opposite, folks. It's not the same.
Yeah, but the thing is that the NIV seems more in line with the whole curse. Remember that whole curse thing? Yeah.
Proverbs 18. A man that hath friends must show himself friendly. What's that mean? If you want to have a lot of friends, then be friendly. NIV. A man of many companions may come to ruin. Are these saying the same thing? Am I missing something here? If you got a lot of friends, you'll be ruined? That's what it says. That's not at all correct.
That's why I have like 4 friends. I'll let all of you people who might consider yourself my friend to fight it out between you to see which one of you gets to be a part of the 4.
The Bible says in Matthew 7 that narrow is the way, straight is the gate, and narrow the way that leadeth to life, and few there be that find it. Revised Standard says the gate is narrow and the way is hard. Wait, is it hard to go to heaven, or just not many do it? Now, they use the these and the thous, and there's a reason for that, and then we'll go on to another subject here. If a word starts with Y, it is plural. Ye, your, etc., okay? If it starts with T, it is singular, and there's an important reason. Nobody in 1611 was walking down the street saying, "How art thou today?"
No, they absolutely were.
They weren't using that. But the King James translators wisely chose to use the these and...
What happened to Klingon religion? So that's a little bit controversial, but you know what? Here's what I'm going to say. If you guys want some in-depth stuff on Klingon lore, Klingon language, after this stream, which is ending pretty soon, I'm going to go over to Top Hats Off, which is linked on my channel page, at least. Go there, and I will answer as many Klingon questions as I get while I play video games. So, that's what I'm going to go ahead and say.
the thous because of the distinction. If I walk into a room and say, "You come with me," does that mean one of you or all of you? You can't tell. But if you use thee and thou, you can tell. You can see in John chapter 3 very clearly. Jesus said to Nicodemus, "Marvel not that I said unto thee," singular, "ye must be born again." He changed it to plural. I'm telling you that everybody must be born again. That's a really important distinction. Otherwise, he'd be saying, "Nicodemus, I'm telling you that you got to be born again." Well, how does that apply to Ken Hovind? It wouldn't apply. The fact is,
I will admit that it is convenient to have the distinction made clear in the English translations. But it was also current language at the time.
it's very precise in the King James. So we can talk all day about that. We'll cover more in our college class. I think the whole concept you need to get in your head is God promised He would preserve His word, so where is it? I would like to hold a copy of it. And after 30-some years, I was slowly dragged kicking and screaming into the King James camp. God preserved His word in English, and we've got it.
So what if you speak Mandarin?
You're screwed.
I guess so.
A couple of verses really attract my attention because of my speaking on creation all the time. Ephesians chapter 3 and verse 9. King James says, "To make all men see what is the mystery, the fellowship of the mystery, which from the beginning of the world hath been hid in God, who created all things by Jesus Christ." There are two important phrases here. It says, "from the beginning of the world." That's a definite time. He created things by Jesus Christ. Colossians 1 says the same thing. Jesus created all things. Jesus is God in the flesh. Well, a lot of these new Bible versions come from the Alexandrian, and they did not believe Jesus was God in the flesh.
Oh.
And they...
Yes, they did. Oh my goodness.
Did they though? But did
Yes,
they, though?
because the Docetist quote-unquote heresy had already been largely dismissed before even the first council, and the Alexandrian school persisted well past that, well into the imperial period of the church. I just...
Has he got anything right about them?
Basically, no. I'm going to take a drink, and then we're going to do some wrap-up stuff. So, basically, we got through 25 minutes of this in like 2 hours. Well, okay, an hour 45.
Yeah.
Okay, so, I just... It's been extremely painful, Kent, but thank you for letting me have an excuse to talk about an area of interest for me I don't normally get to talk about, which is Christian history, and various controversies and quote-unquote heresies and councils and all that. There's an incredibly intricate history going on behind the theological disagreements and all this, and it's I find it fascinating. You might not. I don't know. But okay, so tomorrow at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern, our current plan is to have episode 1 of the Science Friends book club, where we're going to take a look at Standing for Truth's one of his books that he wrote with Ramat, and that was edited by Faithful, Honest, and True, the guy you might remember from the beginning of this video, who was extremely fascinated by my sexual activity for some reason, which is weird and creepy. But okay. So that's going to be tomorrow. So right now the plan is we're going to do the first episode of my channel. Hopefully we can do the second episode on Guts at Gibbons' channel, and then we'll probably go to either Creation Myths, which is Dr. Dan Stern Cardinal's channel, or we'll go on to T. Lane's channel, and then the next episode will be on one of those two channels that we didn't do for the first one, and then we'll kind of cycle back through. And I'll be quite frank with you, this is as an excuse to get all of you who are subscribed to any one of us, but not the other four, to fix that. Trying to make sure that everyone's subscribed to all of us, because we're all putting out content like this. We're all collaborating with each other to get out all this kind of information and whatnot. Let's see. And Sphincter of Doom says, perhaps he doth protest too much. I'm assuming referring to Jason, and yes. Yeah, I mean, he managed to take a Village People song and make it even more gay. So, what does that tell you? I'll leave that up to your imagination. And hey, you know what? Faithful, honest, and true. If you're gay, it's great. That's fine. Just be okay with it. You're allowed to be gay. You don't have to pretend to hate gay people because of your self-loathing or anything. You can just come out. We won't make fun of you, I promise. I mean, okay, I guess I can't say I won't make fun of you at all, because you're a worthless piece of garbage. But that has nothing to do with whether or not you're gay. So then Thursday, the next episode of Creationism is a Mega Catastrophe is going to come out. Now, normally I would have something on Saturday, but right now, because I'm streaming again tomorrow, I don't think anything's coming out this Saturday. I can't rule it out, but I have nothing currently in the works, and I don't have any plans to try very hard to change that. I need to fill out some form with reasons to believe, because I might be having Dr. Fuzzalrana or Fuzzrana on to talk about old Earth creationism, human ancestry, evolution, common ancestry, evidences for intelligent design, stuff like that. That's hopefully in the works. The next set of creatures for the Speculative Evolution project is already in the works. I have finished another creature today in terms of the art. I will be probably uploading the description to the World Anvil tomorrow and tweeting about it. So if you're here, if you're subscribed to me for the Speculative Evolution content, don't worry, it's coming. And I think that's basically it for channel news. Bent? You got anything? No, you're muted. You have muted yourself.
Sorry, I pulled a...
I forgive
Well,
you.
anyway, I was just going to say...
You pulled a Chesh, basically. Because she does that a
Puppy
lot.
had her 10th birthday on Friday, so everyone say happy birthday.
Happy birthday!
On a couple more days.
Happy birthday, Jarowski.
And Copper Magma was approved for Spotify. We should be up in a week or two. I don't know when.
Okay.
And on Sunday, we are going to be starting our session going into the fall of recording. So we got 3 songs we're doing Sunday, and Bose is one of them. That is
Nice. Depredino
a song
intro.
that you'd probably be more familiar with.
Yeah, that's the Depredino
So,
intro outro
really
music.
exciting times coming. Got we're gonna try to get 10 songs recorded in the next couple months, maybe more. So that's it. That's all I got.
All right. Well, I'm going to close down the stream, and like I said, head over to my off-topic channel. But I do want to thank Hovind and Vandelli1998 for super chatting tonight. Because here's the thing, right? I am trying really hard to make this something that I am doing sustainably. I'm getting a lot closer. I'm now at the point where I'm about meeting half of my monthly financial obligations just from doing Dapper Dino stuff. And I am working usually 50 plus hours on this, so it's a lot of hard work. And you guys who are doing super chats or becoming channel members, which by the way, feel free to do that, or donating on a Patreon, or even just grabbing merchandise from the Teespring store, or in many ways, even just going ahead and grabbing stuff from the Amazon wishlist. You guys are the ones who are making me feel like this is a thing I might actually be able to do long term. And so, yeah, all of that support means a lot to me, because my current level of output is entirely dependent on this becoming sustainable. And anyone who is donating in any way is a big part of that. So if you do want to help the channel stay the way it is, there are a number of ways. There's Patreon, linked in the description. You can join right from this page on YouTube. You can do super chats when I'm live or premiering. And you can help out by saving me money by getting me things I need from the Amazon wishlist. And if you don't want to do that, that's absolutely fine, especially if you can't afford it. If you can't afford it, do not give me your money. However, likes, shares, subscription, comments, all of that stuff really helps a lot. And I appreciate everyone who does that. And I'm just going to go ahead and say that I'm going to get out of here and start setting up for probably like an 8:15 or an 8:30 stream on Top Hats Off. I'm not sure what game I'm going to play. I probably should have put a poll out, but I didn't because I'm lazy. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate it. I hope I see all of you tomorrow. But if not, you stay classy.